Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now, usually I lecture on subjects ranging from media, entertainment, surveys, focus groups, a whole host of other things. But today I'm actually really excited because I'm going to be sharing with you one of my research studies. I'm really excited about this. It's not yet done by any stretch of the imagination, and what I am showing you are preliminary results. Much more analyses have to be done here, but it is exciting to kind of test this format out. I'm doing this because I really do feel as though all of the research that academics do, like myself, college professors, and PhDs like myself, we're lucky enough to get published, we're lucky enough to get funding, we're lucky enough to do a lot of wonderful things. Some of what we do may or may not trickle down into the classroom, but ultimately a lot of people don't get to hear about this. And so as a result, what we're hoping to do here today is to educate you a little bit on what an academic research study may look like and some of the things that we cover. And so today we're going to be looking at a movie studies research study here. The study today is Profile of Movie Consumers. This is something that I've been working on really since, last summer for that matter. So it's been a whole year. I just collected the data a few weeks ago, and I'm currently running preliminary analyses, and I'm hoping to submit for publication and for conference presentations within the next year. So hopefully you'll catch me if in your neighborhood. And so let's go to the first slide here. Now, consumer segments. What is a consumer segment? What I was interested in doing here was seeing, can we group people who watch movies together? Now think about that. A consumer segment might be a group of people with similar behaviors. And so what I was hoping to do here was look at people who might consume movies on similar platforms. Maybe watch people or look at people who consume movies through similar genres. I also wanted to look at movie clusters. And so what this means is I wanted to see if movies themselves vary together. And so what that means is if you watch Star Wars, are you also likely to watch Deadpool? Are you also likely to watch other movies within that particular genre? And so those were some of the questions that I had here in this study. Let's move along. So, literature review, significance of study. And so that is the Hollywood sign in the background of this PowerPoint. I have been there in Los Angeles. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely breathtaking. I think the only thing that could pull me away from that was coming back to New York, because otherwise I would have stayed there, no problem. So, a lot of studies in academia have attempted to predict box office. If you measure for all of these variables, what percentage of box office can be explained by the variables that you have accumulated and run in your model. And so as you can see there, I have a lot of citations there. The point is that a lot of people have tried this, and they've been able to predict quite a bit of the box office, but not all of it. We also know that drama and comedy have been most popular with movie consumers. We also know that consumer movie preferences evolve and change all the time. They vacillate constantly. What inspired me to do this study was a Variety article in April of 2016. I actually still have the article. It was a cover story by Variety, which is a Hollywood trade magazine. And what was stated in that magazine is that largely movie marketers were still unaware of who their movie audiences were. Let that settle in. Let that sink in. Movie marketers who are spending millions and millions of dollars largely still do not or did not, back in 2016, know who their movie audiences were. That's horrendous. And so for much of the industry, that was something that was a major concern. But luckily, in April of 2018, it seems as though the movie industry has really corrected for this. And so Fox, for instance, is using analytics. In fact, they have a data collection tool entitled Merlin that is measuring the movie consumption habits of some 25 million people. And so what's going on here is this massive movement for Hollywood in really trying to track who is watching what on what platform. Now, this comes really at the point in which movie theaters are kind of at a really, really difficult impasse. What's going on right now with movie theaters, as many of you know, is that movie audiences continue to dwindle. Don't get me wrong, for every Avengers movie out there, there are 8 or 10 movies that aren't doing necessarily that well. In fact, about 75 to 85% of movies often don't do well. In fact, they often do not recoup their costs, and so they're at a loss. So what winds up happening here is that movies that tend to make a lot of money tend to make a lot of money. And so the Avengers Infinity War, which is currently out right now as of the taping of this episode, that kind of movie is making a ton of revenue and is doing exceptionally well. And so it tends to kind of pay for movies that have, kind of made a negative sale, if you will, or kind of making money at a loss. And so movie theaters are usually the first window for a lot of movie exhibition. And so we know that movie theaters pretty much make most of their money through concessions, and so they kind of rely on that. In fact, there's often an 800% markup on popcorn. Yes, the $8 popcorn you pay for probably costs about $1 to produce. And so movie theaters have been at this kind of weird model for quite some time. The first 3 or 4 weeks of a movie run, movie theaters really don't make that much money. If anything, movie theaters kind of sit here during the first few weeks a movie is run during a movie exhibition. And then kind of going up here is where the movie studios are. So during the first week, if a movie makes $100 million, Disney's probably getting about 80 to 85% of that. And the movie theaters down here are probably getting 20%. And so as week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8, week 9, the movie theater by about week 6, 7, 8, 9, they tend to get most of the box office revenue. But by that point, less and less people are seeing the movie. So that's kind of one issue that is facing movie theaters. Additionally, there's been an uptick in movie theater ticket prices for quite some time. And this is something that has really kind of irritated a lot of consumers. And so they've looked for other options in consuming movies, namely looking for movies that debut the same time a movie might in a theater. Additionally, another issue facing movie theaters is that movie studios want to kind of break down the movie exhibition business model. And so what this means is that typically you'll see a movie, let's say Black Panther, you'll see Black Panther in movie theaters, it'll then go to pay cable, pay satellite, or it might go to DVD, and then go to pay cable, pay satellite, and then it might go to broadcast, and then it might go to a streaming service. But these windows that we're looking at right here are exclusive. That's how companies make money. If it's on DVD, it's likely not in movie theaters anymore, right? There's an exclusive license just for a little bit for DVDs to kind of be the sole place in which you can grab a movie. But then once it moves to pay-per-view, it's not solely with DVDs anymore. And so pay-per-view has exclusivity over broadcasting the movie itself. And so this windowing model is starting to crumble and it's starting to fragment. Consumers are putting pressure on movie studios to see things when they want to see things because this behavior's been kind of cultivated already through TV, streaming apps, and a whole host of other things. Consumers now want things immediately, and they want to be able to dictate when they want to see something and on one platform. So with all of this going on, it really inspired me to take a deeper dive into what's going on here. So let's go to the next slide. So a snapshot of the movie industry, what you can see here is that 71% of North American consumers attend movies at least once. This was true in 2016. Frequent moviegoers, at least once per month, purchased about 48% of tickets in the United States and Canada. So what this means is that if people are going to the movie theaters, they're likely going to be frequent moviegoers, kind of feast or famine with your consumers. 18 to 24-year-olds still are the prevalent population with movie theaters. They frequent movie theaters the most, going nearly about 7 times a year. And at least 79% of moviegoers own at least 4 types of technology: TV, tablets, smartphones, and laptops. Again, we're thinking about the different ways in which people want to consume movies. We know that moviegoers are sophisticated. We know that moviegoers have different pieces of technology. 54% of consumers are interested to consume a movie when it is released for home consumption, and 13% of consumers prefer to view a movie in a movie theater. Let's go to the next slide. So here, theoretical foundation. Theory is something that helps us understand a human process. So when somebody says something is theoretical, not exactly true. A theory is meant to explain why something happens. And so we have the law of gravity. We know it is a law that when we drop a pencil, it will fall to the ground. But we don't know why. Why is where theory comes into play. A theory of perhaps weight is why the pencil will fall down, for instance. And so theory here is used to help explain what's going on because the theory here is tested. So, diffusion of innovation. Diffusion of innovation theory, which I could speak at great length, really covers innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. Very quickly, what this means is that consumers kind of fall along a bell curve when adopting products such as technology, such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, and so on and so forth. You might have the innovators who will immediately grab the next iPhone 10 or whatever else is coming out, really without batting an eyelash. And then we kind of move along through up until the laggards. The laggards are your grandparents who you are begging, for the love of Christ, buy a smartphone so I can text you and call you. Those are your laggards. And so people kind of fall along those five primary standards. Additionally, what we have here is structuration theory. Structuration theory states that consumers harvest and repeat norms, including media repertoires. So this also includes people who might have a laptop and have a smartphone and a TV. That's their media repertoire. So they might have certain platforms in which they consume just about everything with. And so these two theories were brought together to really formulate a really nice, solid foundation for this study. It helps to kind of explain what's going on with the clusters that I'm creating with consumers. Some people might be more inclined to adopt certain pieces of technology more than others. Additionally, some people might have repertoires. They might gravitate toward certain platforms. Let's move along. Incorporated variables, so I used here movie genre frequency consumption, so the frequency with which consumers consume particular genres. Also, movie platform frequency consumption, movie brands, you'll see movie brands as we move along, and I also included demographics here. Let's move along here. Method. So I was really fortunate enough to get a PSC CUNY award, and I created a survey through Qualtrics. And so data collection took place from late March to April of this year. And after data cleaning, I wound up with 386 participants. Data cleaning is super, super important, just kind of as a side note here, because our last lecture was on survey design. Data cleaning is really important. You always want to go through a data cleaning task. And so this might include looking at your data, making sure people have answered all of the questions. You want to make sure that people haven't greenlit or Christmas tree lit a survey, just clicking 11111, 22222, 2121221, and things like that. We just want to make sure we avoid that because it will skew your data over time. Let's go to the next slide. So for gender, I had a nice 50-50 split. As I stated earlier, I worked with Qualtrics, wonderful, wonderful people, great, great company. They did the survey data collection for me. They were able to let me have a 50-50 gender split. So they went out, they collected a randomized sample. So a randomized sample means that people were selected at random. They were selected out of a population list that Qualtrics had internally, and they sampled from that list randomly. Let's move along. So for race and ethnicity of the participants who took this survey, 62% were Caucasian, African American 12%, Hispanic American about 18%, Asian American 5%, other 3%. Now some of you might be upset with me because I haven't really distilled all the different races and ethnicities here. As you can imagine, I could have had 10 or 12 different races and ethnicities represented in this survey, and it probably would have made things more complicated. So it's kind of a catch-22, if you will, because on the one hand, I could have all of these different races and ethnicities represented, but on the other hand, it would be difficult to showcase all of these races and ethnicities in data analysis. And so that's why I elected to have the categories as I had them. Let's move along. Movie consumption frequency, once a day, 23% of participants, a few times a week, 56%, and once a week, 21%. On to the next slide. Movie consumption across platforms. So what you can see here is, once again, on a scale of 1 to 5, people's predilections or inclinations to consume movies on certain platforms. So people really liked video streaming, that's your Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon, followed by smart TV, then cable, then DVD players. Movie theaters, pretty good for the most part, then laptops. Smartphones all the way down through video game console, which is the least likely for people to watch movies on. Let's go to the next slide. Movie platform frequency segments. So here I ran cluster analyses, which is a very complicated statistical analysis, but essentially what it means is we're looking for homogeneity, just like you look for homogeneous milk. The idea is that when you create a cluster of people, they should be super similar within that group, but outside of the group against other clusters, they should be super different. That's where heterogeneity comes into play. We want these clusters that we create to be super similar inside and super different when we compare them to others. Let's look at the data. Awesome. So for the first research question, are there different movie platform frequency segments among consumers? I know that's a lot of words. What I found here was that we have ardent movie platform consumers, that is in the left-hand column, the middle column, in which we have ardent movie platform consumers. I make up these titles. The statistical software does not tell me what to say. And so what we can see here is that we have people who will consume movies on darn near every platform. But then when we look at cluster 2, we have people who, for the most part, kind of watch stuff on other platforms, but really on average or slightly above average will watch it on video streaming services. And that's in the most right-hand column. All the way at the bottom, you can see 3.23. That is your mean. The 1.57 in parentheses is standard deviation. Let's move along here. For research question 2, we have 3 clusters that were produced when I tried to group people based on movie frequency consumption surrounding genres. So what we have here is, for the first column, intrigue movie consumers. These are your consumers who love comedy, action, drama, mystery, and crime. But as you can see, none of these means, 2.67, 2.46, none of these means really reach 3 or higher. And so they're kind of interested in intrigue, but a little less so. As we move along to cluster 2, we have exploration movie consumers. And so these are consumers who really do like comedy, sci-fi, action, drama, and adventure. Very, very, very passionate. And then as we move along to cluster 3, these are uber passionate moviegoers. They seem to gravitate toward action, thriller, mystery, crime, and adventure. And that's why I called them action movie consumers. So from this slide, you can see there's a little bit of variation across genres. Not as much as I thought there would be, but it's still interesting, and it really helps us academics and scholars to better understand what's going on among really passionate movie consumers. Let's move along to the next slide. Movie brands. So what I did here was I looked at top 3 grossing movies in comedy, science fiction, horror, romance, action, thriller, drama, mystery, crime, animation, adventure, family, superheroes from 2016 to 2017. So I included the top 3 from each of those categories. Now what I used here is a factor analysis. A factor analysis is very, very similar to a cluster analysis. The goal here is to reduce data and maximize data at the same time, or maximize the explanatory power of the variable. And so, for instance, you might say, well, we could have 20 movies here that kind of explain movie consumption. But with the factor analysis, they can figure out which movies really explain variation in the data set, are really indicative of the variation in the data set across consumers. That's what we're trying to do here. Let's move along. For the first factor analysis that was created here, yes, there are movie viewing segments. All of these movies vary together. The first factor was action. Star Wars Rogue One, Star Wars Last Jedi, Captain America, Civil War, so on and so forth. And the numbers to the right-hand column are correlations to the factor itself. So you can think of the decimals at the right column as kind of the parts and the whole being the alpha score at the top, which is 0.79. And so that kind of gives you a sense of how correlated, how related they are to this particular factor. As you can see, Star Wars was super related to this factor analysis. Deadpool barely made it in. Let's move to the next factor analysis, scale. Second one is animation. And here we have Finding Dory, Secret Life of Pets, Zootopia, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, and The Jungle Book. And I know the Beauty and the Beast and Jungle Book weren't necessarily animation, but they did have animation segments. There was CGI, there was use of 3D as well, and so that's why I kind of named this animation still. I do think it still kind of falls within that category. Let's keep going. And then finally, we have horror. We've had really good horror movies in the last few years, so fortunately, I was able to look at It, The Conjuring 2, Get Out, and Split, and they all varied together nicely. Let's keep going. Relationship between genre and platform. I was curious to see if there's a relationship between genre and platform. If you really like comedies, are you inclined to watch them on a particular platform? For this particular study, I was interested in if you really like movie comedies, is there a place in which you prefer to watch it, being a smartphone, a tablet, a computer, or anywhere else for that matter? And so genres here were the independent variable, movie platforms were the dependent variable. Let's have a look. As you can see here, we did have some interesting results. So for the horror and romance genres, pretty much everybody is watching those two genres almost on every device: laptop, theater, desktop, smartphone, tablet, and video game console. So these might be genres that are platform agnostic, which means that really doesn't matter what platform you watch it, you just watch it. Looking further down on this slide, we have for drama, you can see the in the fourth column from the left's desktop, you can see that consumers are less likely to watch dramas on desktops. That's why there's a negative 0.133. So if you carefully look at the numbers here, if it's negative, that means there's an indirect relationship here. That goes the same for mystery in the first column with laptop. You can see there's a negative 0.17. That means the more people watch mystery, the less inclined they are to watch movies on laptops. And so that is not a direct relationship, if you will. Let's keep going. And so here we have smart TVs, which are very popular for romance and animation. If we keep going alongside with these PowerPoint here, we can also see that for horror, people are inclined to watch it on satellite TV, and people are inclined to watch superhero movies on video streaming services, which is very practical here because Marvel has done an excellent job of showcasing much of its content on Netflix. And finally, if we move to the next slide, we have implications here. And so it looks like movie consumers are inclined to adopt multiple pieces of technology to view movies. We've seen in this study that a lot of people are inclined to use certain kinds of platforms to watch certain kinds of movies. Horror and romance and comedies and mysteries are desirable on certain platforms and undesirable on other platforms as well. This is important because, as we said earlier in this study, movie producers, movie executives are very much interested in figuring out what the next Hollywood business model is going to look like. Are we going to still have exclusive windows with content? It looks like less and less likely. Instead, it looks like we're going to be having, I think down the road, same-day release across all platforms, which is really what movie studios want. A Disney executive will tell you that's exactly what they want, is to have a movie simultaneously released in theaters, TV, smartphones, laptops, and computers, and anywhere else that you can think of. The goal here is to maximize hype, and the best way that you can do that, of course, is to have everything released instantaneously. It really, really helps studios in that regard. Movie theaters, of course, are a little bit freaked out by this because they want to have that exclusive window. After all, they make most of their bang on concessions. And in fact, alcohol consumption has recently rocketed alcohol to the #1 concession in movie theaters. It's no longer popcorn. And so from everything that we've seen lately with movies, especially with plush seating and relaxing chairs and blankets in some movie theaters and restaurant food and alcohol and other things that are being offered, movie theaters are really fighting hard to stem the tide against eroding the windowing business model. And so there's a lot to consider here for Hollywood as it moves forward in its own strange and wonderful way in figuring out how we'll monetize movies in the future. Let's move to the last slide here. Implications for the movie industry and future studies. So we've kind of covered what's going to be coming down the pike. I think the movie industry is going to have to really think about its movie business strategy moving forward. Future studies here include familiarity with actors and genre. And so the idea of how much of a fit between an actor and genre is necessary for people to view content on certain platforms. So, in other words, if Will Ferrell is starring in a horror movie, we may not watch the movie in a movie theater. After all, Will Ferrell is a comedy actor. Why is he in a horror movie? Would I pay $15 to go see him in a horror movie? I may not. It doesn't really seem like a fit. And we've had these thoughts in the past, whether it's Seth Rogen, maybe in a romance comedy or anything like that. When actors try to stretch, sometimes we might be disinclined to view the movie in a movie theater. And so this might also have implications for actors who are trying to negotiate pay and understanding their genre fit a little bit more. Additionally, I'm also interested in looking at this data with demographics and lifestyle variables. So the idea is that can demographics, can lifestyle, can personality of consumers predict the kind of movies that they're going to like? Can it predict genre? Can it predict the kind of platforms that they might use to watch movies? And so that's kind of what I've been working on the last year, for that matter. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Keep laughing and keep learning. I'll see you next time on Late Night Learning.